What if I told you that in California, the cost of owning a typical home has become about 62% higher than renting, and that only about 23% of households can now afford a mid-tier home in the state? That is not just expensive, that is a warning sign. A market this stretched does not stay strong forever. And now, in 2026, many people are asking the same chilling question. Is California's housing market finally breaking? For years, California looked unstoppable. Prices kept rising, dreams kept shrinking, and families kept sacrificing more just to stay in the game. But now, something feels different. Homes are sitting longer, buyers are backing away, sellers are cutting expectation, and across the state, more people are quietly packing up and leaving, chasing a life they can actually afford. So what is really happening here? Is this the crash nobody wanted to believe could happen? Or is this the beginning of a much bigger shift that could change California forever? Stay with me, because the next 10 reasons reveal why this housing story is far more serious than most people realize. Number 1. Homes are still far too expensive for normal buyers. Let's start with the biggest problem of all. California homes are still priced far beyond what normal buyers can realistically afford. For many families, the dream of buying a home in California no longer feels difficult. It feels almost impossible. Even people with stable jobs, decent savings, and good credit are finding themselves completely locked out of the market. That is what makes this moment so dangerous. A housing market can only stay strong when ordinary working people can still enter it. But in California, the gap between what homes cost and what people actually earn has grown so wide that the market is starting to crack under its own weight. When teachers, nurses, office workers, small business owners, and even many tech employees struggle to buy, that is not a healthy market. That is a market built on pressure, frustration, and shrinking demand. The real shock is that this affordability crisis is not just affecting luxury homes or wealthy neighborhoods. It is hitting the entire market. Starter homes are no longer truly starter homes. In many parts of California, even the most basic homes come with price tags that feel completely detached from normal life. Buyers are walking into open houses already knowing they may be outbid, outpriced, or simply unable to qualify for the monthly payment. And that payment is not just about the home price. It is property taxes, insurance, repairs, utilities, and interest costs stacked on top of each other until the dream becomes unbearable. So instead of buying, many families are stepping back, waiting longer, or giving up entirely. And when enough people can no longer afford to buy, the market starts losing the very fuel that kept it alive. That is why this is more than just an affordability issue. It is the foundation of the entire slowdown. If normal buyers disappear, the market weakens. Sellers have fewer serious offers. Homes sit longer. Price growth slows down. Fear starts replacing confidence. And once that happens, the so-called unstoppable California housing machine suddenly looks far more fragile than anyone expected. Number 2. Incomes have not kept up with housing costs. Here is where the crisis gets even worse. It is not just that homes are expensive. It is that incomes have fallen far behind those prices. That is a huge difference. A housing market can survive high prices for a while if wages are rising fast enough to keep up. But in California, that balance has been badly broken. Over the years, home prices climbed faster and faster, while many workers saw only limited growth in their paychecks. So even when people are earning more than they did a few years ago, it still does not feel like enough. The house price moved up faster. The down payment grew larger. The monthly payment became heavier. And suddenly, people who thought they were doing everything right, working hard, saving money, building credit, are realizing that homeownership is still slipping farther away. That creates disappointment, frustration, and a deep sense that the system no longer works for ordinary people. This is the part many people underestimate. Buyers do not make decisions based only on the listing price. They think about what their paycheck can actually handle every month without destroying the rest of their life. They still have groceries to buy, children to raise, cars to pay for, medical bills, student loans, and everyday living expenses that keep rising. So when housing eats up too much of their income, the dream stops feeling exciting and starts feeling dangerous. That is why many potential buyers are hesitating in 2026. They are not just saying, "This home is expensive." They are saying, "This payment could trap me." And once buyers start thinking like that, confidence begins to disappear. People delay, people wait, people back out. Some even leave the state entirely because the numbers simply no longer make sense. And that is exactly why this issue is so powerful. A housing market cannot stay healthy when local incomes are too weak to support local prices. At some point, the math breaks. When fewer households can qualify, fewer homes can sell. When fewer homes sell, momentum fades. And when momentum fades in a market already stretched to the limit, the slowdown becomes much more serious than most people expect. Number 3, mortgage rates are still crushing affordability. Now let's talk about the pressure that turned an already expensive market into something even more brutal: mortgage rates. Even if home prices stopped rising for a moment, high borrowing costs have made buying in California feel painfully out of reach for many people in 2026. This is where the market starts to feel truly broken. A buyer might look at a home and think, maybe I can stretch and make this work. But then the mortgage payment appears, and suddenly the dream collapses. The same house that felt barely possible at a lower rate now comes with a monthly payment that feels shocking. And that changes everything. Buyers are no longer just fighting high prices, they are fighting the cost of borrowing money itself. That means even small changes in rates can add hundreds, sometimes even thousands, to a monthly payment. For ordinary families, that is not a small problem. That is the difference between moving forward and giving up. What makes this even more frustrating is that many buyers entered the market hoping rates would fall enough to bring relief. But relief has been weak, slow, and nowhere near enough to restore true affordability. So people are stuck in a painful middle zone. Prices are still high, yet financing those prices is also expensive. That creates a double squeeze that drains confidence from the market. Buyers begin second-guessing every decision. They worry about overpaying. They worry about being house poor. They worry about locking themselves into a giant monthly bill while the economy still feels uncertain. And once fear enters the housing market, momentum starts fading fast. People do not rush to buy when they feel trapped. They wait, hesitate, and step back. That hesitation is exactly what we are seeing spread across California. And this is why mortgage rates matter so much in the bigger picture. High rates do not just hurt buyers, they weaken the entire market. They reduce demand, slow sales, and make homes harder to move. Sellers lose leverage. Listings sit longer. And the energy that once made California real estate feel unstoppable begins to disappear. When borrowing becomes this painful, the market does not need a dramatic crash overnight to feel like it is breaking. It starts freezing from the inside out. Number 4, homeowners are locked into low rates and refuse to sell. Another major reason California's housing market is breaking down in 2026 is something many people do not see at first. Millions of homeowners are trapped by their own low mortgage rates. During the years of ultra-cheap borrowing, many people locked in rates that now look unbelievably good. That sounded like a blessing at the time, and it was. But now it has created a new problem. If those owners sell their current home and buy another one, they may have to trade a very low monthly payment for a much higher one, even if the next house is not much better. So instead of moving, they stay put. They hold onto homes longer. They delay downsizing. They postpone upgrades. They avoid listing altogether. And when that happens across a huge state like California, the market starts losing its natural flow. People who normally would have sold are frozen in place, and that makes the entire system feel stuck. This creates a strange and unhealthy situation. On one side, buyers are desperate for more choices. On the other side, many homeowners are thinking, why would I give up my cheap mortgage just to take on a painful new payment? That question is stopping movement all across the market. Families who need more space stay cramped. Older owners who might want to downsize stay where they are. Workers who might want to move closer to a new job decide it is financially smarter to stay put. So the housing market stops acting like a healthy market and starts acting like a traffic jam. There may still be demand, but the normal chain of buying and selling slows down badly. And when fewer people move, fewer homes hit the market in a natural way, which adds even more tension to an already stressed system. That is why this low-rate lock-in effect is such a serious problem. It freezes supply, weakens activity, and makes the market feel lifeless. Buyers face fewer options, sellers face a tougher environment, and the entire market loses momentum. California housing is not just expensive in 2026, it is stuck. And when a market becomes this frozen, even small shocks can start causing much bigger damage than people expect. Number 5. Sales are weak, and buyers are backing away. Now we get to one of the clearest warning signs in the entire market. Sales are weak. And when home sales start slowing down in a place as massive and powerful as California, people should pay attention. Because a healthy housing market depends on movement. Homes need to sell. Buyers need to feel confident enough to step in. Sellers need to believe there is real demand waiting for them. But in 2026, that confidence has clearly faded. Buyers are not rushing in the way they once did. In fact, many are doing the exact opposite. They are stepping back, watching from a distance, and asking themselves whether this is really the right time to make the biggest financial decision of their lives. That hesitation matters more than many people realize. A market can survive bad headlines for a while, but when buyers stop acting, the slowdown becomes real. And the reason buyers are backing away is not hard to understand. They are looking at high prices, painful mortgage payments, rising insurance costs, and an uncertain future, and they are deciding the risk is simply too high. Many people are no longer afraid of missing out. Now they are afraid of buying at the wrong time. That is a huge psychological shift. Just a few years ago, buyers felt pressure to jump in quickly before prices went even higher. But now, many are asking a different question. What if prices fall after I buy? That fear changes the entire mood of the market. Offers become slower, bidding wars fade, more buyers walk away before closing, and sellers who were once confident begin to realize that the crowd is no longer chasing them the same way it used to. This is why weak sales are such a dangerous sign. They show that the engine of the housing market is losing power. When homes stop moving, everything starts to feel heavier. Sellers get nervous, agents feel the slowdown, builders become cautious, and buyers gain even more reason to wait. That creates a cycle that can drag the market down even further. In other words, weak sales are not just a symptom of trouble. They can become the force that makes the trouble much worse. So now the real question is not just what happens to California next. It is what happens to the people still trying to survive this market. Drop a comment with just one word, collapse or correction, and let's see what the audience really believes. And before you go, watch our previous video on your screen right now, because it connects directly to what is happening here. We put a huge amount of work into every video, so please support the channel by subscribing. It takes just one click, but it helps us more than you know. Number 6. Inventory is rising, and that is starting to pressure the market. Another big reason California's housing market is looking weaker in 2026 is this. Inventory is rising. That means more homes are sitting on the market instead of getting snapped up right away. And in a state where sellers once had all the power, that is a major shift. For years, California felt like a place where almost any decent home could attract attention fast, sometimes with multiple offers and intense bidding wars. But when inventory begins to build, the mood changes. Buyers suddenly have more time to think, more homes to compare, and more confidence to negotiate. That may sound normal in a balanced market, but in California, it feels dramatic because the state has been so tilted toward sellers for so long. The California Association of Realtors reported the statewide unsold inventory index jumped to 4.4 months in January 2026, up sharply from 2.7 months in December 2025, and it stayed elevated at 4.0 months in February 2026. That is a clear sign that homes are not moving with the same speed and force as before. What makes this more serious is that rising inventory does not automatically mean the market is healthy again. In fact, it can signal the opposite. In a strong market, homes usually sell quickly because buyers are eager and able to afford what they see. But in 2026, more listings are piling up because many buyers are priced out, worried, or simply unwilling to take the risk. So inventory is rising for a troubling reason. Demand is not strong enough to absorb supply the way it once did. And once homes start sitting longer, sellers begin adjusting their expectations. They may reduce prices, offer concessions, or accept deals they would have rejected a year earlier. That is why this trend matters so much. Rising inventory shifts power away from sellers and exposes weakness in the market. It tells us that buyers are no longer chasing homes with blind urgency. Instead, they are becoming selective, cautious, and patient. And when that happens across California, the market starts to lose the heat, the hype, and the momentum that once kept prices and confidence moving upward. Number 7. Renting is simply cheaper than buying. One of the biggest reasons California's housing market is under so much pressure in 2026 is brutally simple. For many people, renting makes far more financial sense than buying. And that changes everything. In a healthy housing market, buying a home usually feels like the smart long-term move. People may stretch their budget, but they believe the sacrifice is worth it because ownership brings stability, security, and future wealth. But in California right now, that logic is breaking down. More and more people are looking at the numbers and realizing that buying would leave them paying dramatically more every month than renting a similar place. And when the cost gap becomes that wide, the emotional dream of homeownership starts losing to cold financial reality. Buyers are no longer asking, "Can I buy?" They are asking, "Why would I pay so much more just to own?" That question is dangerous for the housing market because once people stop believing buying is the better deal, demand begins to fade very quickly. This is especially true for working families, young professionals, and even older adults trying to protect their savings. They are comparing a manageable rent payment with a much heavier ownership bill that includes mortgage payments, property taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance, repairs, and unexpected costs that never seem to stop. Suddenly, buying does not feel like freedom, it feels like financial pressure. And in an uncertain economy, people become much more careful. Instead of rushing into a house, they stay in rentals longer, renew leases, or move to cheaper areas where their money goes further. That means a huge group of potential buyers simply stays on the sidelines. They may still want a home one day, but in 2026, the numbers are pushing them to wait. And that is why this issue hits the market so hard. When renting looks smarter than buying, the housing market loses one of its strongest forces: urgency. Buyers become patient. Sellers lose leverage. Homes take longer to move, and the market starts feeling weaker, slower, and far more fragile than the headlines once suggested. Number 8. Some high-cost areas have become almost impossible to justify. Now here is where the situation becomes even more extreme. In some parts of California, buying a home no longer feels financially reasonable at all. This is especially true in some of the state's most expensive areas, where the numbers have become so stretched that even high earners are starting to hesitate. For years, people were willing to tolerate outrageous prices because they believed California real estate would always keep climbing, and because living in certain areas felt worth almost any sacrifice. But in 2026, that belief is getting weaker. In many of these markets, buyers are looking at massive home prices, huge monthly payments, soaring insurance costs, and everyday living expenses that are already painfully high. And they are beginning to ask a very uncomfortable question. Does this even make sense anymore? When people start questioning the basic logic of buying, the market enters dangerous territory. Because housing does not stay strong on numbers alone, it also depends on confidence, and confidence is starting to crack. What makes this even more serious is that these expensive markets were once seen as California's strongest and most unstoppable housing engines. They attracted ambitious professionals, investors, families chasing opportunity, and buyers willing to stretch further than almost anywhere else in the country. But there is a limit to how much people can stretch before reality hits. And now, in some of these areas, owning a home can feel like signing up for years of financial pressure just to hold onto an address. That changes buyer behavior fast. People start delaying purchases. Others settle for renting. Some leave for nearby regions. And some leave California altogether, searching for a place where homeownership still feels connected to normal life instead of financial survival. That is why this matters so much. When California's most expensive housing markets begin to feel irrational, the entire state feels the shock. These are the places that once symbolized endless demand and unstoppable wealth. But when even those markets start losing their magic, it sends a powerful message. This is not just a small affordability problem anymore. It is a deep confidence problem, and that is when housing markets become truly vulnerable. Number 9. More people are leaving California for a cheaper life. Another reason California's housing market is under serious pressure in 2026 is that more people are deciding they simply cannot justify staying. For years, millions were willing to accept the high prices because California offered opportunity, lifestyle, weather, and prestige. But now, for a growing number of families, workers, retirees, and even high earners, that trade-off no longer feels worth it. They are looking at the cost of buying a home, the cost of renting, the taxes, the insurance, and the daily pressure of simply trying to keep up, and they are reaching a painful conclusion. Life somewhere else may be easier, safer, and far more affordable. That is a huge problem for the housing market. Because when people begin leaving instead of competing to stay, demand starts to weaken from the inside. And once that shift begins, it can slowly change the entire mood of the state. What makes this even more dramatic is that this is not just about people chasing luxury in another place. In many cases, it is about ordinary people searching for breathing room. A young couple wants a home with a yard. A family wants lower monthly costs. A retiree wants peace of mind. A remote worker realizes they no longer need to stay in one of the most expensive housing markets in America. So they start looking at other states where the same money can buy far more space, far less stress, and a much better quality of life. That choice may be personal, but when enough people make it, the effect becomes economic. Fewer buyers means less pressure on homes. Less pressure means slower sales. And slower sales make the market look weaker and more unstable. That is why migration matters so much. Housing markets depend on people wanting in, not planning their escape. When California starts losing residents to cheaper and easier alternatives, it sends a powerful warning signal. It tells us that this is no longer just a price problem. It is a lifestyle problem, a confidence problem, and a long-term demand problem. And when all three begin hitting at once, the market starts looking far more fragile than it did during the boom years. Number 10. Wildfire risk and insurance costs are making homeownership even scarier. The final reason California's housing market looks so fragile in 2026 is one that goes far beyond price alone. Wildfire risk and the insurance crisis are making buyers more afraid of ownership itself. For many people, the question is no longer just, can I afford the mortgage? Now it is also, can I even get reliable insurance? And what happens if disaster hits? That fear matters. A housing market can survive high prices for a while, but it becomes much weaker when buyers start seeing a home not just as a dream, but as a financial risk filled with uncertainty. California's own Department of Insurance has said the state faced an insurance availability crisis caused by growing wildfires. And in 2025 it approved wildfire catastrophe models specifically to help stabilize rates and expand access to coverage. What makes this even more dramatic is that the recent wildfire disasters exposed just how deep the problem had become. State officials said the January 2025 Palisades and Eaton fires were recognized as the largest urban wildfire disaster in state history, damaging or destroying thousands of homes and businesses. After that, California moved new laws into effect on January 1, 2026 to strengthen wildfire resilience, speed up claims, improve protections, and shore up the FAIR Plan because, in the state's own words, those fires exposed deep weaknesses in the old insurance system. Officials also announced additional FAIR Plan reform efforts in February 2026 after finding serious failures in oversight, claims handling, and consumer protection. And this is why the insurance issue hits housing so hard. When buyers fear rising premiums, limited coverage, delayed claims, or future wildfire losses, they become far more cautious about purchasing a home at all. Even if someone can technically afford the house, they may no longer trust the full cost or long-term risk of owning it. That uncertainty weakens confidence, slows demand, and makes already expensive housing feel even more dangerous. In other words, California's market is not only battling high prices in 2026, it is battling fear. And when fear enters the housing market this deeply, the damage can spread much faster than most people expect. So when you step back and look at the full picture, it becomes clear that California's housing market in 2026 is not being hit by just one problem. It is being squeezed from every direction at once. Homes are still far too expensive. Incomes have not kept up. Mortgage rates remain painfully high. Buyers are pulling back. Inventory is rising. Renting often makes more sense than owning. More people are leaving. And now wildfire risk and insurance uncertainty are adding a whole new layer of fear. That is why this market feels so different now. The old belief that California housing could only go up is starting to crack. And when confidence starts breaking in a market this stretched, the effects can spread very fast. But here is the bigger question. Is this a temporary slowdown or the beginning of a much deeper reset? That is what makes this moment so important. Because once ordinary people stop believing they can afford to live, buy, and build a future in a place, the problem becomes much bigger than real estate. It becomes a warning about the future of the state itself. Families start looking elsewhere. Young buyers delay their dreams. Retirees cash out. Investors become more cautious. And little by little, the market loses the energy that once made it feel unstoppable. California is still one of the most powerful and desirable places in the world, but even the strongest markets can weaken when the pressure becomes too heavy for too long. And now I want to hear from you. Do you think California's housing market is truly collapsing? Or is this just the painful start of a major correction? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next. And if you think this situation is shocking, wait until you see what is happening next in other major housing markets across America.